Hey, hi, hello, welcome back to another Bookish video. I'm Marielle, and today, since I'm starting off my YouTube adventure, I thought I would do the new Booktuber tag and go through these 30 prompts so you can get to know a little bit about me as a reader and what I'm like and what my taste is like. So let's jump in. So the first question is, what is your favorite color and a book in that color? So that would be Shark Heart. This is a book about a person that turns into a shark. It sounds ridiculous, but trust me when I say this is going to get you in your feels. I really like this one a lot. Next, describe myself in 3 characters. So the first character I would say would be Henry from Daydream. Henry second guesses himself, doesn't like to ask for help, but in the end, really wants what's best for everyone around himself, and I really related to his character and the struggles he goes through. Next we have Elizabeth from Lessons in Chemistry. This is a book about a female chemist many years ago when females were not in the science field nearly as much as men and the struggles she went through. She looks at everything analytically. Everything is a problem that can be solved, that can be researched, that can be figured out, and that is very much me. I have many friends that tease me constantly about the fact I have spreadsheets for just about every decision in my life, so I get it. I loved this book. Next, we have Margot's Got Money Troubles. This is a really sweet book about a mom that is willing to do anything in order to give her children her best life. And as a mom, I get it. I don't go in the direction she goes. If you've read the book, you know. But this is a really, really fun literary fiction book that it's a blast to read. Yay or nay on hyped books? I kind of land on both sides. I will always try a hyped book. So some of my yays, I love Emily Henry, I love Abby Jimenez. Harry Soto is back. I didn't expect to love, but man, that was a fantastic read. House by the Cerulean Sea, again, not my typical genre, but fantastic read. So all those were yays. On the nay end, we've got books like The Soulmate, which even though I love the author, was a big flop for me. When the Moon Hatched, I should have DNF'd it. I spent too much time reading a book I didn't end up enjoying. So I'm yay and nay. All right, number 4, one book for every season. This was harder than I expected. Some of the summer and winter I got right away. It's the fall and spring that were harder. So for winter, I'm going to say No Exit. This is a thriller that takes place in a rest stop. A driver gets snowed in, and let's just say she's snowed in with people that are not so good, and the adventure that ensues at this rest stop. Going into spring, I'm going with Ready or Not. This is a book I read this year. I gave it 5 stars. I really loved it, and this cover has great spring vibes. This is a book about an accidental pregnancy and all the stuff that comes following. Moving into summer, I had so many I could pick for summer. I went with One of the Girls. This is a thriller that takes place in Greece where a group of girls are on a bachelorette trip, and it's an action-packed thriller that makes you second guess and wonder till the very end, and every little piece comes back together and connects, and it's a fun read. I really enjoyed this one. I read it a while ago and it still sticks with me, so that says a lot. And then finally into fall. So fall, I leaned into the cover as well as the fact that fall is a great time to read more kind of creepy books. So I'm going with The Quiet Tenant, which definitely has fall vibes on the cover. This is about a woman that is kept captive for a very, very long time and almost ends up integrated into her capturer's lifestyle. It is a really interesting read. You really start to understand, I guess, Stockholm Syndrome a little bit, but like that idea of like sympathizing and understanding your captor and also just being totally afraid to do anything about it. So great read. That's my pick for fall. Next is a book that wrecked me emotionally, and for me that is The Simple Wild. I do cry sometimes during books. It takes a lot. I ugly sobbed while reading this book, and a lot of that is because I lost my dad and the character in the book loses her dad, and so that whole scene, I mean, it was a year ago and I can picture myself standing in the kitchen just like losing it over this book. So good. But man, just be ready. Get the tissues going. Next is a book that I always recommend. I hate this question because it really depends on who you are as a reader, but one of my go-to recommendations is The Last One. And what's funny about this recommendation is every single person I tell to read it, I go, just trust me because I'm not going to tell you anything. All you get is this. A guy goes onto a cruise ship. He goes to bed, he wakes up, the cruise ship is empty. And that's all I'm going to tell you. That's all people told me when I read it, and I'm very grateful for that. Just trust me when I tell you, if you list 500 things you think might be happening, you will not get it. Like, ooh, it's so good. Next is a book that I would have with tea and cookies. I am not a tea drinker, so instead I just started thinking through like, okay, what am I going to eat with cookies, cooking, etc. And it led me back to the lessons in chemistry, where I mentioned this before, but she actually uses her science knowledge to create a cooking show. So I felt like it was a great tie-in. Again, great book. Favorite guilty pleasure. That would be the Selection series. This is a series that is like utopia, dystopia meets The Bachelor. I feel like that's the best way to describe it. You have a king who has various people that he dates until he picks the final one. And that is the gist of the whole series. It is such a guilty pleasure. I've actually reread this series 2 or 3 times. Whenever I'm looking for like a mindless audiobook to have on in the background, this is one of the ones that I will pick up again and again and again. Number 9 is your favorite dessert and a book that reminds you of your favorite dessert. I spent a while thinking about this one. I don't have a favorite dessert. I like lots of things. I like cookies. I like ice cream. I like sweets. I just started thinking through books that remind me of dessert in general and came up to How My Neighbor Stole Christmas. This is a book that came out last year, and it is a take on The Grinch Who Stole Christmas, but as a romantic comedy. And there's a competition within this book, and part of that competition is making various tasty treats like candy canes and hot cocoa and all those good things. It's a fun read. I gave this book 5 stars. I had a lot of fun with it. It's a perfect Christmas book, so maybe don't pick it up today, but put it on your shelf and pick it up in December. Are you a procrastinator? Yes. The end. In reading, I definitely am. If you see my shelf, these top 2 shelves are all TBRs that I haven't gotten to, many of which have been here for a long time. A perfect example is The Red Rising. I have heard so many good things. I haven't picked it up because I know it's a series, and so I know when I pick it up, I'm committing to multiple books. So I will get to it, I promise, but I'll probably procrastinate a little bit longer before I jump into this one. Which segues so great into the next one, which is how many books is too many for a series. I spent a lot of time thinking with this, and I came up with the number 4. I do feel like when you get into these series that are 9, 10 books long, you end up finding books in between where you're just like, I could take it or leave it. And 4 seems to be a really solid number of you can still have individual plots along the way, you still have that great character development without stretching it out too long. Number 12 is going to be an interesting answer. How do I feel about cliffhangers? The simple answer is I hate them. I hate books that end that. I just recently talked about the book The Lost. I hated the fact it ended kind of like ambiguously at the end with a big but. The book I mentioned before, The Last One, is a massive cliffhanger and one of my all-time favorite books. So I guess if it's the right book, I can handle a cliffhanger, but all in all, not a fan. I'd rather things get wrapped up. Next is hardback versus paperback. And I think when it comes down to it, paperback is easier to travel and move around with. Both are great to me. I wish I could love reading more on my Kindle than I do. I still read on my Kindle quite often, especially when I get books from the library or ARCs, but I'd prefer a physical book. Hardcover or paperback doesn't make that much of a difference to me. My least favorite prompt on this list. My favorite book. Someone that reads close to 200 books a year, every year for many years. I can't even pick a favorite book from last year. So I went for one book that sparked my love for reading initially, and another book that opened my eyes to thriller type genres, and in general, just kind of moving into my adult era of reading. So Harry Potter was a book that sparked reading for me. This came out when I think I was in middle school, the very first book. So I actually picked up the very first Harry Potter book before it was a series. Actually, my mom got it for me because she went to Barnes & Noble, or probably Borders, and said, my daughter loved Ella Enchanted, what next? And my mom brought home this, and I go, wait, that is too many pages for me, I can't handle it. Which is funny knowing how the rest of the series goes. But turns out, yes, I could handle it. I loved it. I dived into the series. I think the last 2-3 books of the series, I actually went to the midnight premieres to pick up the books so I could read them in person. This was the start of loving reading, and I grew up hating reading, so this was a big turning point for me. And then, once upon a time, Kindle's First Reads introduced The Butterfly Garden, which I think is funny because this book's popular enough. The fact it was a First Reads freebie is kind of fun to look back and think about. This is a thriller book where women are captured by a man and turned into butterflies. It's morbid, it's gross, and it's really the first thriller dark book I picked up. And I actually remember I was reading, this is so bad, but I was reading this when my firstborn was a baby, and my go-to when I was doing night feedings was to have a Kindle on, because if I had TV on, it was loud, and if I didn't do anything, I would fall asleep sitting up. So my go-to was picking up a Kindle, which is how I read this one. So a lot of this book was read at the hours of like 3 a.m. and, you know, really healthy times, but I have loved it. I've reread it since, and it holds up, and it's just a great thriller. Least favorite book. I was trying to think of some of the books I DNF'd, and I couldn't come up with a lot of the ones that I DNF'd because they just leave my mind. So instead, I want to talk about one I didn't DNF that I classically vent about, and that is Colleen Hoover's Ugly Love. Now, unlike a lot of Booktube, I will admit I have liked a lot of Colleen Hoover's books. Things like Verity, It Ends With Us, I enjoyed a lot, and I know that's an unpopular opinion. Ugly Love, let me just sum up the plot of The Ugly Love. Man and wife have a child. They lose their child. Man never recovers. Woman, decades later, says, hey, get over it. And he goes, you're right, okay. There we go, I'm done. That's the end of the book. It was so, as a parent, I can't even imagine what it's like to lose a child. But I definitely know that having someone say, get over it, isn't going to solve the pain I feel. So I hated the way it ended. There's my vent for you. Ta-da. What am I currently reading? So I said before in another video, I always have 2 books going at once. I always have an audiobook. I always have a physical book. Right now, I'm physically reading a book called Well, Actually, and this is an exciting read for me because it is my first ever ARC. This is a book that comes out later this year. I got an advanced reader copy, so I'm about 25% in so far. I'm loving it. I'll tell you all about it later. And the book I'm listening to is The Situation Room, which is nonfiction. And it's funny because I told my brother, because I think he would like this book now that I'm halfway through, and he goes, you're reading that? That's not like you, but I'm really enjoying it. It's the history of the presidential Situation Room, from when the Situation Room was first formed and to like all the big things that happened in it since then. I'm assuming going up to present day. I'm kind of back in the Vietnam War stages right now, but we'll see as I continue reading. The last book you recommended someone. So I work with some amazing people, some of which I know have tuned in and watched these videos, but one of which I am constantly texting back and forth different books that I've liked that she likes, and I mean, part of the reason my TBR is 200 books long is because of her. So when I read this prompt, I literally went to my text chain with her and go, what's the last book I recommended her? And the answer is The Lost. I feel like that's a bad answer, because it was a good book. It was a 4-star read, but it wasn't like... Now, I will say, one of the books I recommend very frequently is Under the Whispering Door. That's a book I've probably purchased for 6 or 7 people just because I love all the warm and fuzzy feelings behind it, and I think the messaging behind it is really sweet, and I feel like that would have been a better answer, but the truthful one, you know, they're both great. Oldest book by publication date would actually be Pride and Prejudice. 3 years ago, I started a new routine where I reread books that were ruined for me in high school to see if I enjoyed them again. Pride and Prejudice happens to be the oldest one on my shelf. It is also one that I really enjoyed rereading, despite the fact I hated it when we overanalyzed it to death in high school. Not every classic has been a win, but this is the oldest one on my shelf. Newest book has to be the ARC I'm reading that doesn't even come out till later this year, which is Well, Actually. So, you know, opposite ends of the spectrum. Favorite author? I have a lot. I just did a video where I talked about some of my automatic buy authors, which includes people like Abby Jimenez, Emily Henry, Riley Sager, a lot of the ones that I think a lot of booktubers were automatically buying. So instead I wanted to think through an author that isn't talked about very often. And the reason is that author hasn't published a book for a few years. I'm hoping that means that they're not done writing. Helen Hung? Hopefully I'm saying that correct. So she wrote The Bride Test, The Kiss Quotient, and what she does that I really love that you don't see very often in books is she takes romance and adds the layer of neurodivergent on top of it, and what that looks like while dating, and what that looks like while dating. And the books are funny, but they're also like you walk away with bigger meanings and bigger understandings. I really love this author. Every few months I go check online to see if there's any more whisperings of more books to come. So the next prompt is buying books versus borrowing books. I love owning books. This is one of 2 shelves. My other one's off camera over here. There's talk of building a new library setup in our guest room, which, will be really fun to share and videotape one day. But I love buying books. I love going to used bookstores. I love my book of the month subscription, but I also listen to about 60% of the books that I read. And I think buying audiobooks is silly because unless you're going to reread it, like what's the point of owning an audiobook as a digital file sitting on your phone? So even though I love owning all these pretty books, I actually would say overall I prefer borrowing just because of the audiobook aspect. The next prompt is books I disliked that most people loved. I'm going to get some harsh feedback from this one, but you know what? We can't love them all, right? Some of the ones that are really big that I have not enjoyed. First of all, the ACOTAR series, I said that before. Migrations, which is supposed to be this really wholesome literary fiction story that it didn't get me. The Hawthorne series, I actually read the whole series because I felt like something better was going to happen and it never pulled me in. Good Rich People. In general, I think I have a very unpopular opinion where in general, I don't automatically love rich people dramas. So those are just a few. I'm sure I've got more. Number 25 is Bookmarks versus Dog-Eared. I have a little collection of bookmarks hanging out up here, some of which I even made, like my little crocheted bookmark. I love my crocheted bookmark. So I have my bookmarks here. If I lend you one of my books and you dog-ear it, you will never get another one of my books. I cannot stand people that dog-ear books, period. I also cannot stand when people do that thing where they use this like flap of the book as their bookmark and then they ruin the book jacket. Nope, find a bookmark. I don't care if it's a receipt or a napkin, find a bookmark. A book you can read again and again. I kind of talked about these two already, but that would, for me, be The Selection and Harry Potter. For me, if I'm re-listening to a book in particular, I love to have a book that I just know so well I can kind of zone in and zone out, and it's not a big deal. So those 2 books really fall into that category for me. Number 27. Do you like to listen to music while reading? Not if there's words, is my answer. And I love this new trend of like having playlists that come with books. I think it's a cute idea. I don't use it. I don't follow it at all. If I listen to music and I get into the music, then my brain turns off from the book. I will put on classical music or songs without any words attached to it, but I can't do it if there's any words. I will get distracted. Number 28. Books with one point of view versus books with many. I prefer one point of view. Part of that's just because it's easier to keep track of. There are several books that I have read that had a ton of point of views. One of the ones that comes to mind is The Stand by Stephen King. It has so many point of views, I actually had a little notebook going and I loved the book, so there are exceptions to every rule. But in general, when you start to have too many points of view, I just start to lose track of everything. And so when there's multiple points of view, especially when there's a ton of points of view, or when you have characters that are very similar, I start to lose track and I feel like I spend more time figuring out who's who and what happened last rather than enjoying the book. So in general, fewer is better. Number 29 is, do you read a book in one setting or multiple settings? As I shared earlier, I am a mom of 2 young boys. One is in 3rd grade and the other is in pre-K. And let's just say reading a book in one sitting is not something that I will be able to do for the next few years. In fact, I prefer the opposite. I love books with very short chapters, so that if I have 10 minutes to sit down and read a chapter, I can sit down and read a chapter for 10 minutes. So definitely not in one setting right now for me. And the final prompt is, do you read a book based on the cover? Yes. Don't we all? If you don't, you're not being honest. I think we all judge a book by a cover. Now, I will say there are books that I will gravitate towards and away based off of their cover. I actually prefer books that are more abstract on the cover. They don't have cartoon characters or photographs of characters. So these are the kinds of books I gravitate towards more. Sometimes I feel like the cartoon characters feel a little YA at times, even when they're not. But I would still take a cartoon cover like this one over an actual picture of someone any day of the week. We all judge a book by a cover. Those are 30 questions so that you can get to know me as a reader, as a person, a little bit more. I would love to hear what opinions you have about reading and how you view yourself as a reader. Make sure you comment below, and before you leave, make sure you like and subscribe to this channel. Thank you, everyone. Bye.